Hello and welcome back to Let's Play Suikoden. Since last time, all I did was go and level up as many characters as I possibly could in order to basically just see who's good, who's not. I leveled up everybody who's going to be in Suikoden 2 past level 55, everybody else at least to level 45. So we're going to go ahead and talk to Sanchez and look at some of those people who stand out. And this is sort of just... a lot of this stuff actually surprised me. I didn't know about a lot of it. I just looked at different characters and saw, okay, what stats are good, what stats are not. And to be clear, I want to make sure you understand what stats I think are the most important. First stat I think is the most important is the magic stat, and the reason is because it's basically the power and defense stat combined for your magic, as well as it determining your MP. So I think that characters who have a high magic stat in general are more valuable than those who do not. And it depends on, obviously it depends a lot on their role, and by role I mean whether or not they're short range, a long range, or a medium range. If you're a heavy frontline fighter and you have a high magic stat, that's really useful because you'll take less damage from it. But it's also a little less important than if you're, say, Luke, whose only real function is having a high magic stat. The second most important stat, I think, is speed in general, because it's important to be able to go before your enemy, otherwise you'll get attacked and take damage, in which case you'll just slowly be worn down. So, those are the two stats I think are the most important, but skill is, all of them are important. I think luck is the least important. And it obviously depends on your role. For example, Gremio here, I don't consider to be particularly good, even though, he's Gremio, and I love the man, because his magic stat and his power stat both are in the below 100, even though he's level 59, which means that he has very little offensive potential, and his defense isn't anything special, his speed is low, his skill isn't great, and his luck is only okay. So really, Gremio is a very poor character, and that's what I mean. And Pawn is a similar deal. His power is off the charts high, his skill is fine, his defense is very high, but his magic and speed are low, which makes him somewhat of a liability. His HP is really high, which gives him a lot of survivability, obviously, but he will be taking tons of damage from any magic attack we have. I'm not going to go through every character, but I do want to go over these 5 here, as well as a few others. So Cleo is, as we've noticed, really, really well balanced. Her skill is really high, which means she's able to hit her attacks really well. Her magic stat is really high, which gives her a lot of MP, and gives her a lot of defense against magic attacks. Now, because she's a long-range fighter, I don't think her defensive stat matters all that much, because hopefully you'll have some beefy front row fighters who won't die in front of her, so she won't need to even fight. So, as a result, I value her power, her skill, her magic, and her speed the most. And she has very high marks in all of those categories, so I think she's one of the better long-range fighters. There's really 3 long-range fighters, 4, I would say, actually, that are kind of the cream of the crop, and you can't go wrong using any of those. Victor is a really, really interesting character, because his power and defense are amazing. For a front-line fighter, that's really important. His speed is not actually as bad as you think it would be, but his skill is really low, which causes him to miss quite often, and a lot of times when you miss in the late game, you get counterattacked, so he ends up taking a lot of damage in that way. His HP is also surprisingly low, and his magic stat is not great. At no point will I ever give Victor a rune to use his MP, but I like having a high magic stat because of the defensive factor, and he's okay. I don't think Victor is one of the top tier short-range fighters, even though we're forced to use him for most of the game, including the final dungeon. Another interesting character is Camille here, and I didn't realize Camille was as good as she is. I have her at quite a high level. She happened to level up get very high level just out of nowhere, but so some of these stats are slightly inflated for what they would be if you were to compare them 1-to-1, obviously, but her speed, her power, her defense, her magic, everything is really good on Camille. In fact, she's probably the most versatile character maybe in the whole game other than the hero. I was really surprised by this outcome, and I suspect that if we were to take away 10 levels and get her even with Victor, her magic stat would probably be a little bit lower, maybe, about 130. Her luck stat would probably still be double digits, but even then, her skill is really, really high, which means that she'll always hit. Her power is not as high. Her defense is pretty good. She's just really solid. And I think that she's one of the best medium range characters. I don't use her very often, so this surprised me. The second of the kind of classic, I call them the big four long range fighters to keep in mind, is Kirkus. His magic stat is a little lower than Cleo's, which makes him a little bit more of a risk, I guess. But his skill is really, really good, and his power and defense are solid. His speed is higher than hers. Barely. Actually, I guess it's probably a little bit lower, actually, because he's a few levels higher. But his luck is a little bit higher than hers, so I don't know. Kirkus is another solid choice. Valaria is one of the best short-range fighters. I was also very surprised by this outcome. Her magic stat is higher than Victor's. The only stat that's lower than his is her power, in fact, and defense. But she's overall, I think, a little bit better than Victor. The only problem with her is that she's not one of the characters you can use in the final dungeon. There's no real reason to have a third short-range fighter in the final dungeon, so it's not worth having her. That said, her Falcon Rune is really strong, as we know, and she's just solid. Another character that surprised me was Sheena. Now, I knew that Sheena was really good in Suikoden 2, but I didn't realize he was this good in Suikoden 1. His stats are completely ridiculous. All of them are really, really good, and I would even say that if it weren't for one fatal flaw with Sheena, I would use him over Milich. And the reason that I think that Milich is still a little bit better is just because Milich, the issue with Sheena is that he's stuck with the lightning rune. So he ends up basically being very, very similar to Flick. And Flick is, as you'll remember, a short-range fighter who has the lightning rune, and his stats are even very similar to Sheena's. So, and because Flick is it's a mandatory member at 3 or 4 parts of the game, including the final dungeon, there's no real reason to use Sheena because it's just sort of redundant. Otherwise, I think that Sheena is obscenely good, and in fact, I would say he's better than Milich. Milich, however, is more versatile, so I like him a little better. Milich also is able to use a shield, and I don't believe Sheena is, so that gives him a little bit of a defensive edge. Another character that came out quite surprising was Meg. I was surprised at how good Meg was. I knew her luck stat was the highest in the game. That's sort of well known among Suikoden players, is just that Meg has a really, really high luck stat, but her other stats are okay. She's not too bad. I don't know what role she'd function in exactly, other than just a long-range attacker, but if you're looking for items, if you're trying to get different items and trying to get a completionist, you should use Meg because she's the one who's most likely to get you those. Another character that, Fusulu ended up basically being exactly what I thought, a ridiculously powerful person with high defense with no other stats worth talking about. I didn't level up Mina, I didn't level up Antonio or Lester, I didn't bother because I knew that they weren't going to be very good. Flick, as you can see, is similar in stats to Sheena, but he's going to be more useful. Other characters that surprised me, Alan and Grenn both really surprised me. I think that if it weren't for the fact that I have to use Victor and Flick, I would use Alan and Grenn in the final dungeon. Why? Their stats are really, really high, and they have really powerful runes. Alan with a Rage rune and Grenn with a Thunder rune. The Thunder rune is the upgraded version of the Lightning rune. So their magic stats are really, really high as a result, and they're short-range fighters with high power and defense. I think these characters are incredibly good. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that Milich could swap runes, again, I would probably use them over him. The problem with them is that you do need a lot of healing earlier in the game when you're likely to use them, and in the final dungeon you have Victor and Flick, so it's not really worth it to use both of them, or either of them, really. So there's that, but they're really good. Kasumi is the third of the 4 great long-range fighters. Her speed is really what makes her so good. She has probably the highest speed in the whole game, and I think Camille's skill was about that, but she has ridiculously high speed, her magic is okay, and her defense and power and so forth are all fine. The issue with her is that her Shrike rune is unremovable, which means that she's unable to use magic, so I wouldn't use her in the final dungeon, but she's good. The last one that is worth talking about is Tengar, whom I've mentioned before. She's sort of the last of the great long-range fighters. I think that she's the best. and the reason is just because her magic stat is the highest. And when you have her that's what's really important, is just the magic stat. So I'm going to use her in the final dungeon. I'm going to go ahead and pick out my party now. Actually, no, I'm not, because what am I talking about? We have the final battle to attend to. So let's do it. And everyone else that I leveled up everybody basically, except for I think about 4 characters I didn't level up, and those characters, everybody not as good as the ones I just pointed out. Okay, so we're fighting Uber and Kanan. I don't think Kanan will give us any trouble, but it looks like they have a bunch of monsters and 100,000 troops, so there's that. We have spotted the enemy. Yeah. This is not good. That's pretty impressive. She conjured up, what, 80,000 monsters? Wow. But we have people. I guess Leknot is just straight up on our team now. Too bad she's not 108 Star of Destiny. Yeah, we're gonna use a Soul Leader. Okay, you must never use that rune. Fair enough. Okay. Alright, yeah, we have Joshua. He's a dude. Inhuman power to the power that tears the sky apart to this person. I always think that translation is weird. I've noticed it in a lot of Japanese to English translations that they use this person a lot, and you never hear this phrase very often in English, so I've always thought it was a bit weird. We're still in advantage. Okay, apparently they still think they're in an advantage. I don't know. Okay, the last battle. And this is, in fact, the final major battle. And in this battle, if somebody dies, it's not really a huge deal. It'll slightly change the very end of the game, but now that we have Gremio revived, we don't need to be that cautious with our men. I'm going to not let them die, though, because I like having all of our men alive. We always start with Dragon Knights because it basically just immediately annihilates 5,000 men. Why wouldn't you do that? Let's use our ninja. And there's a few weird things about this battle. First of all, I don't know where Cleo and Camille and those guys went. They were the best guys we had in our earlier battles, but this battle we don't seem to have them. I don't know why that is, but what can I say? And it's kind of a bummer because our bow attack suffers as a result. I'm hoping that they do a bow attack, but they're most likely to use charge attacks in this battle. Yeah, because Uber has his charge, so we want to use our Children of the Runes against that, and that should do about 5,000 men worth of damage. Perfect. Let's use our merchants just to cut them down a little more. Hopefully this will succeed. Wow. Well, that's too bad. And we have only one more ninja. Which means we're going to have to rely on the thieves at the end there, but it should be okay. Okay, yeah, they're charging again, so we want to use our magicians. This definitely won't kill them. It'll probably do about a little over 3,000. 4,000. Okay, not too bad. Now we have to, hopefully Grenn will get a little lucky here. Good. Oh, we got 2,000 bits. Just what I needed, Grenn. We're going to use our bow, just because we don't know what they're doing. Yeah. Come on, there's one guy left. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Ugh. That's the most frustrating thing ever. Stop stealing money. God, these guys are nuts. Okay, we won. And again, if somebody dies in this battle, it isn't really that big a deal. It's the only battle that stuff doesn't really matter. I've had it happen to me a couple times. It'll change some of the flavor text at the end of the game, but otherwise it's not a huge deal. You got Gremio back, you've basically completed the game. Okay. Yeah, Uber's gonna ditch them, because all he's doing is hanging out with Windy. I like how he was just right over there and just went away. Oh, cool. Some of our allies showed up. Hanzo, leader of the ninjas. Okay, so we actually meet Hanzo at this point. Yeah. Cool. And here's this dude, the chief of the warriors village. Come to lend us a hand. A wonderful war, apparently. Okay, well, Cliff Crusader, yeah, we don't have any time. Okay, let's go into Gregminster. We're finally back. Yeah, no kidding. It's been quite some time. Okay. Yeah, so these two guys are coming with us no matter what. And now we have to pick our party. Now, remember, if you remember from last time, I said that I would use Clive here, and I'm going to do that. I'm not going to use him for very long, but I'm going to use him really quickly, just because I think that there's a Easter egg to see with Clive in the party, and the last person I want is Tengar. And I'm going to grab Clive as well, wherever he is. I don't know where he went. Where's Clive? Come on, dude. There you go. Okay. This is our crew for a little while. I'm going to swap Clive out for Kai in a little while, but first... Yeah, Matthew is still sick, man. He should be in his tent. Okay, yeah, and we're unable to use Loicon for this area as well. Not that... I don't know why anyone would do that, but just so you know, we're unable to use him. Now... I'm going to go ahead and just leave Gregminster right away. And the reason is because I want to go to Rockland. It's been a while since we were here. We can actually go back to anywhere we've been already. We have the map, finally, but I'm going to go ahead and go to Rockland. And the reason is you may remember that there's a gravestone here that actually mentions Clive by name. And I don't remember which one it was, but... Clive, forgive me for not dying at your hands. If you have Clive in the party, you get this little extra scene. It's a trick. You're trying to deceive me again, woman. I swore I'd find you, and I'll never give up until I do, so I can kill you with my own hands. So you get that little scene, and that's a hint for Suikoden 2. Clive will be a little bit more important in Suikoden 2, so look forward to that. But I wanted to show that off. And now that we're here, at this stage of the game, the enemies are much more serious. I'm going to just go ahead and use the Hell Rune with Mamba to eliminate them. This is another, like, if it weren't for the fact that we have to have Victor and Flick here, I would recommend this as our training spot. But because we have to have Victor and Flick, I don't think it's really worth worrying about. The Hell Rune just annihilates every battle, basically. And that gives us some levels for Clive. Okay, cool. So we got a little bit of bonus from that. Not half bad. And we can just fight these guys. Good stuff. Okay. Alright, so let's go back into Gregminster. Now, we can actually go to some shops in Gregminster, but I'm going to do that next time. There's one last thing I want to do before we end the video, and that is we have a little bit of a fight. So let's do that before I end this video, and then the next time we will continue on into the main castle. Ah, Aengid, how have you been? I remember now, you're the one who let us go when we were disguised at the Fortress of Quaba. Yeah, he was a good guy. Schultenheim Rhinebeck III, indeed. Please let us pass. I can't. I am an Imperial General. The Imperial Army is virtually finished. Please let us through. I owe you one, and I would hate to harm you. Even if the Imperial Army is defeated, I cannot betray Emperor Barbarossa. If I, Aengid, betray him, who will he have left? Well, that's too bad, but we have to go in. So, here is the fight against Aengid. Use your judgment on him. He is not a very difficult battle. I think that basically this battle is not too hard. He will use powerful magic, but our team is really powerful. So we shouldn't lose this battle. He's much easier than Sonya, I believe. And once we take some damage from him, we will want to use the Divine Wind, or whatever it's called, the final wind magic spell. Yeah, I mean, he's doing minimal damage. And the Shining Wind, that's what it's called. Yeah, we're doing just way too much damage for him to be sustainable. Now you can see why I really like the magic at this stage of the game. It does about 600 damage compared to the physical attacks, you know, roughly 200 against people like Angeed. And because we have a solid team, we get to go first every single turn. So that's really, really good. Oops. No. Yeah, we'll have Luke use it because his magic stat is the highest. So we'll get the most healing out of it from him. And this turn we should win. Yeah. We didn't even get half the heal. Okay. So now that we defeated Angeed, he shall go ahead. I agree. It sucks. Just as some things can be right and useless at the same time, can't something be wrong and priceless. It's kind of a classic situation. So, I'm going to do one final thing before we end off this video. I know it's running a little long, but there's one last thing I want to do. Let's go ahead and use that on Flick, because we will start getting into random encounters. I want to go over here and grab this treasure chest. And as soon as we grab it, I'm going to leave and do our final preparations. That's the Windspun armor. It's the best piece of armor in the entire game. As I mentioned in the last episode, or one of the earlier episodes, I'm going to give that to Humphrey. Now, here's a Colossus. It's just exactly what you think it is, just a giant enemy, not that challenging. I also think that it's a little bit important to get our characters a little bit higher in level, maybe level 60 or so, but it's not that big a deal. The final dungeon isn't very long, and the final boss isn't that hard, but we have one last thing to do. So I'm going to go ahead and return to the fortress. I'm going to give the armor to Humphrey, and I'm going to make my final preparations for the last area of the game. So I hope I'll see you next time on Let's Play Suikoden.